FALCONS with their 4 extra EA330 LX high-performance aerobatic aircraft. Fantastic show from them, and we're expecting, I think,
today as much as possible. We have had changes even as late as a couple of hours. And just to keep you refreshed on what you can expect to see, this is what it looks like at the moment. So we will kick off the display in just over 15 minutes time. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that is something very, very important. The Royal Air Force Chinook, 12 time, to that wonderful Army Air Corps helicopter, the LYNX.
But Rich has just flown in the muscle pits we've seen here on many occasions before. We'll be putting that through its outstanding paces from RAF Shawbury for a spectacular 25-minute display at 2 o'clock. On from that to another of the Warbirds, the solo Yakovlev Yak-3 of Bob Davey, and then something that's not in your souvenir program, 2 flypasts from an RAF Airbus Atlas C1, the A400M.
A number of flypasts for us. And then we have a late edition, around about 4:45, which is that wonderful biplane, the STEARMAN. And then, if everything goes to plan, we will have the last display item just as we head up to the hour at 5 o'clock.
Into the flying display at very short notice to cover some of these gaps, so a huge thank you to them. Indeed, there is that in the souvenir program, there's still mention of a few other aircraft that aren't on the bill today for various technical reasons. The Jet Provost is one, the Catalina is another. That aircraft is still, I think, without its propellers at Duxford. They hope to get that out of maintenance soon. And B-17 Flying Fortress Sally B, which has been temporarily grounded for a few weeks due to a Federal Aviation Authority airworthiness directive affecting all B-17s. The very good news is, the last I heard, it should fly imminently. Listening to that list of aircraft that are due to be here, it really is mouth-watering. There's going to be some fantastic displays this afternoon. It's absolutely into land. Looks very spectacular. They put a little bit of smoke on to add to that attraction. But actually, this is a normal operational way of landing formations at an airfield. By braking like that, they start to slow down and they start to get in position to land in order. So you often see formation teams do that run and brake, as it's called. But it was a lovely touch to see a little bit of smoke as well today, united with. And we'd also like a Mr. Nazir to go to the public information tent. An important place because also today it's very crowded. There are around 55,000 people here. If you do happen to lose somebody in your party, obviously particularly a child, that is where the child will be taken. There is a children's centre at the information point, so that is where you need to head if you unfortunately have lost track of a child in your group. Can I also suggest, and again, it's quite obvious, I'm sure you will, so please don't do it. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Jonathan. Yes, indeed. We want you to have, and hopefully you're nicely settled. You know where everything is, but I'm just going to remind you to make sure you spend some time today having a good look around. Look into all the corners of the showground. There is something absolutely everywhere. The whole idea is this is an at-home day. You can come and see the Royal Air Force at home. To meet the men and the women, to see the equipment, to sit in things, get that photo you never thought you'd ever get, like sat in a Red Arrow's cockpit, or as many people were earlier, the centre of RAF Engineering.
RAF technical training has been Cosford's raison d'etre for decades, and long may it continue. It gives this station such a different feel from anywhere else around the Air Force, and
something you will not see anywhere else. I mean, we've named that area the Cattery for that reason, but even then, there's 2 tornadoes.
Yeah, it's special in many, many ways. You've heard lots about the C-130 today already, but for the enthusiasts out there, this is a one-off. This is going to be the last military parachute from an RAF C-130 Hercules by British military personnel. So it is one for the record. Friends have done their display. It will be time for the RAF Falcons to give you the best parachute display in the country.
A little bit of gentle rivalry there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I have been asked to say on behalf of the French team, they can't send their commentator up here today because he is down on the drop zone, because he's also the drop zone safety officer, and we are some distance away from the DZ itself. So I promised him that I will do my best to explain what's going on. I will just put a precursor on that. I do not speak French, and I do not intend to try and speak French, so c'est la vie.
We're all very grateful for that. So, Gaz, just tell us quickly, what are the weather conditions? I mean, it looks to all of us, looks perfect at the moment, but of course, parachuting needs very particular weather.
Absolutely. We do need to do very, very specific set of checks and calculations, and some of you may have seen earlier a small red helium balloon going up into the air, and that wasn't a child releasing a balloon. And while we're waiting for our French colleagues to get themselves set for the drop, I'll just tell you a little bit about the FALCONS experiences all over the world and carry out disciplines from basic parachuting up to advanced, high-level, specialised parachuting with special forces. We also have two officers on the team. We have the OC Falcons, which is Flight Lieutenant Mike Reeve. He will be jumping today, and his deputy this year is Flight Lieutenant Jen Littler. They join the team, commandos, logistics, engineering, and the list goes on. These are some of the best French parachutists, and they are very proud. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look up to the skies, the French team Phoenix have now jumped from the aircraft, and you should see them coming down. Are you sure they dropped?
Yeah, they're out.
Ladies and gentlemen, they have gone round for a dummy drop because we do have aircraft landing, so we can't carry out the parachute display while there's aircraft landing.
They've jumped already, you muppet.
What you can see now is the team doing an incredibly complicated manoeuvre and very skillful, and that's linking up their parachutes to form a triangle. This takes exceptional skill by the parachutists to make sure that their lines don't intertwine and they're controlled all the way down to the ground. As they get closer, they will split and create their own formation ready for landing. Well, I think you'll agree, actually, that's very effective. And again, as they get close to the ground, you can see they are flying the national flag and the flag of the French Air Force. And the last man down will be carrying the flag of the French Air Force. Please, once again, put your hands together for the absolutely fantastic and formidable Team Phoenix. And they've already reported back that they can see the crowd down here, and it is amazing, and they are really, really looking forward to this. So I do want to hear as much noise on the way down as possible. At about 1,000 feet, they can pick up that noise, and it will give them such a huge buzz to hear the crowd here today at Cosford. The gorgeous weather today means that the team are going to do a full display, jumping from around 7,000 feet. And as they come out towards the airfield now, look towards the rear, towards the hangars, and you'll see the C-130 running in. It'll come straight over the top of us. The parachutists will jump out. They will free fall for about 3 to 4 seconds before they pull their canopies. And immediately they'll deploy red smoke and go into the full routine of their display. Now we've got some lovely weather here today and lovely blue skies, so the backdrop of the red, with the red, white and blue of our canopies, will give an absolutely memorable and fantastic display. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you are watching history here today. This is the last jump by a Royal Air Force parachutist or military parachutist from an RAF C-130. And as significant is the crew today flown by 47 Squadron from RAF Bryce Norton, a squadron that has amazing history and one that has worked with the RAF Falcons for a long, long time. And ladies and gentlemen, here they go, the 2023 RAF Falcons Parachute Display Team. And you should see now the other, and they turn 180 degrees back up the jump run. And parachutists who have separated themselves from the main group, who are our flag bearers today. And the team coach, Flight Sergeant Liam Lyons, has now called them to get into their first formation. And they're going to our dedication today, which is the heart. And this is dedicated to everybody here today at RAF Cosford, but particularly to anybody who's been involved with the C-130 Hercules, but also to a couple of our special guests here today. It's Jimmy and Monica Morgan, who've come here to see the Falcons. The team are now going to go into the split. Odd numbers go left, even numbers go right. And the coach will go for a 90 degrees to go back on themselves, create 2 separate snake formations. Into our signature move, which is the carousel. This one is a great one for photographs. Awaiting here though is Flight Sergeant Liam Lyons, live. And what he's doing now is calling the team into their final manoeuvre to line up for landing. Once they're into the anti-leech, a Sergeant J. Coleman Moffat flying the colours of the Union flag and the Royal Air Force ensign. Flying the colours, the red, white and blue, wherever we go. And leading the team in then, as I said, is Flight Sergeant Liam Lyons, this year's team coach, followed up by Sergeant Paddy Gilwar, Sergeant Greg Ashleby, Corporal Joe Finch, Sergeant Owen Collins, and last but not least, OC Falcons Flight Lieutenant Mike Reeve. near the front will get a great view of the Falcons. And again, a historic moment for us. We'll be doing the line-up today alongside our French counterparts, Team FedEx. And that is our last Falcon.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm sure you'll agree with me, that's an absolutely fantastic way to open the flying programme here at the Cosford Air Show 2023. We are now expecting a fly past, and this is a very special fly past by the C-130 Hercules. As this, difficult to believe, but in just a few days' time, this aircraft will leave RAF service. Girls, look to your right-hand side. One of the very last chances we all have to experience the sight and sound of the C-130 Hercules.
Oh, still pretty nice.
The fly past is due here at 10:30 on Wednesday the 14th.
That's all the way out there.
If you would like to see the aircraft as part of that tour, please have a look at social media.
Royal Air Force Chinook display. It's our very first public display of the season. If you look to the distance, you can see the crew running in now, and the iconic silhouette of the Chinook just be... And here we go. The RAF in 1989, before most of the display team were even born. Jim has flown the Wessex, the Augusta 109, the Squirrel, the Griffin and the Chinook. He's undertaken operational tours across the globe and is the Chinook's only current A1 instructor, meaning he's forgotten more about flying than most of us will ever learn. He uses the wing over to reposition for the run-in back along the crowd line, and exactly the same way a frontline pilot will recce a landing site before they're landing. He's running in now for the famous roller coaster, pitching the aircraft up to 50 degrees from the horizontal before pushing over at the top, bunting the aircraft and racing back down towards his hard deck of 100 feet. As he passes crowd centre, he'll enter the second half of the roller coaster, asking the Chinook's two 5,000 horsepower engines to offer up a big chunk of their performance before throwing the aircraft over the top of the second bunt. Joining Jim in the cockpit today is Flight Lieutenant Jamie Johnson, known as JJ on 18 Squadron. JJ joined the RAF in 2014 and has served on 18 Squadron since 2020. He's taken part in exercises in a host of exciting locations around the world, including Macedonia, Estonia, Lithuania and the United States, and is deployed on operations in Mali. Around his display duties, he's working up towards becoming an operational captain, ready for deployment in the autumn. Jim and JJ are now running in from the right for the solo nose-over. Jim, in the right-hand seat, is entirely reliant on JJ for his patter. Let's join them in the cockpit now.
Ready? Enter. Now. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 250.
As they complete their nose over, they begin setting the aircraft up for the second of the pedal turns. Jim puts the aircraft into a max performance climb before putting in a large pedal input at the apex, reversing the aircraft through 180 degrees. As they exit the pedal turn, they'll perform a pass of the flight line and give you a chance for some cracking photos of the Chinook. He joined the RAF initially as an armourer, where he worked to prepare the RAF's now retired Tornado fleets for operational sorties. However, in 2015, he sought a change of career and converted to aircrew, fulfilling a lifelong ambition of being paid to fly for a living. The aircraft is supported by a huge number of engineers that keep that airframe airworthy and functional. All of them have returned to Cosford today, to the school where they learnt their trade, and it's their absolute privilege to be able to show the endeavours of their efforts here for you. They're just resupplied and gave them the opportunity to demonstrate the Chinook's astonishing power-to-weight ratio. As they complete the corkscrew, they'll begin a 405-degree spiral descent back down towards their hard deck. It's worth noting that all of our display activity is conducted around normal duties and operational commitments. Both aircrew and engineers work tirelessly to deliver their normal operational output and will return to work tomorrow to fly and fix helicopters and ensure the UK retains a credible air manoeuvre capability. The crew are positioning now for a run-in and break. This is a great chance for a photo of the aircraft's underbelly, but more importantly, enables Jim to bring the blade slap to RAF Cosford. But there's an awful lot more to the Chinook force than just the aircrew and engineers who are here at Cosford today supporting the display. Every trade at RAF Odium exists with the singular aim of enabling the Chinook force to deliver air manoeuvre. The tireless work of our air operations, the only helicopter capable of this impressive feat, and it's an attribute that has helped many a crew get out of a tight spot. Now position the aircraft for an over-the-shoulder departure. As they lift to the hover, please give them a big wave and a cheer. They assure me that if you're loud enough, they can hear you over the thunderous sound of the Chinook's blade flap. With a flash of the landing lights and a wave from the crewmen, the 2023 Chinook display is finished. It has been an honour to display the Boeing CH-47 Chinook for you here today and bring the blade slap to RAF Cosford. Please come and find us in the RAF village to meet our team.
We have a very small but dedicated team of RAF regulars, reserves and civil servants who are all involved in making these displays possible. We are a living memorial to those that served, honouring and promoting the courage and bravery of all those who came before us. However, we also proudly give our support and inspiration to future generations in support for several STEM initiatives throughout the virtual reality and simulator experiences. The Battle of Britain aircraft attend over 900 events with displays and flight past, meaning we appear in front of for you now is a very special Air 7, flown by Flight Lieutenant Tony Cooper. one of the flight commanders on 64 Squadron in 1944. As well as her involvement in D-Day, AB also flew sorties in August 1942. During the fierce aerial battle in support of Operation Jubilee and the Tippy Raid, one of her pilots, Flight Sergeant Dixie Alexandra, was credited with destroying a Dornier 217 bomber in AB 910 during these combats. AB 910 also famously flew the first unauthorised Spitfire passenger, Margaret Horton, was weighing the tail down whilst the aircraft was taxiing to takeoff. The pilot unknowingly got airborne. Amazingly, Margaret managed to hang on and the pilot safely landed the aircraft. Neither Margaret or the pilot or aircraft were harmed. For 6 years before being returned to Vickers Armstrong for refurbishment in 1953. After this, it was displayed regularly by renowned Spitfire test pilot Jeffrey Quill until being donated by the company to BBMF in 1965. PZ-865 was flown to Colchester and presented by Hawker Siddeley to the BBMF. PZ-865 currently appears in all black night fighter colour scheme, replicating the Hurricane Mark IIC BE-634. Coded ZYV of 247 Squadron, the Squadron's Hurricanes were used for night air defence over Plymouth and Exeter area for night intruder operations against targets in northern western France. Keep up to date with our activity. You can find us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RAFBBMF and on Facebook at BBMF Official. You can also visit our PR stand.
The shows about the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Let's hope all the hard work going on right now as Royal Air Force Coningsby trying to get the next serviceable pays off. We do get to see it this afternoon. That'd be great. date with what you can expect through the rest of this hour. Next on the display programme is the LYNX helicopter. Then we'll be back to the Royal Air Force, light, shape, sound of the Typhoon. And then we'll stick with the jet cream, but we'll go back in time. Fabulous historic jets. What they always provide to the RAF Cosford Air Show is this station's near neighbour at RAF Shawbury. Not only do they host some of those aircraft that aren't able to land here because of the length of the runway, like the F5s and the Puppy Suisses that we'll be seeing here later on at 2 o'clock, but they also assist in terms of providing. Indeed, I've just been informed by the Space director that we're going to slight change. It won't be the LYNX next, it will be the Typhoon. This is one of the very loud fast jet teams, the close display teams work out a number of different routines that they can display. Dependent on the cloud base. Very low cloud, flat display, a little bit higher.
missions, particularly in hot shader that Typhoons have been carrying out of late. Operations. At one end you've got close air support and overwatch, and there's been a lot of that going on hot shader. At the other end, complex air-to-air missions. Those sorts of tasking. Very much a swing roll platform, able to switch between air-to-air and air-to-ground with ease in the course of a single sortie. So from the right-hand side, final pass, Royal Air Force Typhoon. Now, and that's the Royal Jordanian FALCONS. Really looking forward to that. Unique visitors to RAF Cosford, but regular visitors to the Royal International Air Taxi.
The display will take between 4 to 15 minutes depending on the wind, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Tell us about the aircraft you fly.
The aircraft you fly is the extra 330 LX, which is quite unlimited, or like the United States.
Jordan.
So I'm not saying that because I'm Jordanian, but really it's quite a unique destination now for most of the people for the world. Like we have Petra being place, we have DNC, we have Wajaran, that has been
heading back during the president's stop of the program. So at least we do get to see this Belgian air component NH-90 from 40 Squadron at topside in the air, one of 4 NH-90 NFH NATO frigate helicopter versions in Belgian service. But now we look back to the past of one of our own flying services in terms of rotary wing operations, a very familiar machine only a few years ago in military hands, but now operating in the civilian world, the Westland LYNX AH-7, which comes to us from Project LYNX XZ179. That's the serial number of this helicopter, based at North Weald in Essex, and this is the first display season for this particular civilian.
It certainly is, if you're in a battlefield helicopter.
Now, those of you who remember seeing the LYNX in its Army Air Corps days will remember we used to see the most extraordinary aerobatics being performed. Something of the LYNX's agility and its still outstanding speed, because this has always been a helicopter that has been tremendously fast, and indeed it's a specially modified LYNX that still holds the outright world helicopter speed record.
Service with both the Army Air Corps and the Royal Navy, and the easiest way to differentiate between the two was the undercarriage, this being the Army version at the skids, perfect for work on Salisbury Plain without sinking into the grass too much, whereas the Navy version had wheels and casters, just the type of thing you need for turning it around and around on a very small flight.
Yeah, that was the raison d'etre, really, or one of them, certainly, of the LYNX in Royal Navy service, was operation from the Royal Navy's smaller ships. And indeed, the team behind Project LYNX will be returning to flight a former Royal Navy LYNX Mark 8 in due course, which is a very exciting prospect indeed. The one exception to that rule, as Andy just mentioned, was of course the Mark 9 Lynx of the Army Air Corps, which had a wheeled undercarriage. It was quite a different beast in many ways, based on the earlier Lynx 3 project. And they were the last Lynx in UK military service with the Army Air Corps, retired in 2018. Mark 7s like this were phased out in 2015. The Royal Navy's Mark 8s followed in 2017.
And indeed, this aircraft replaced in service by a very similar looking aircraft. It is similar looking, it is very, very different. The Wildcat, where both the Army and the Navy versions are casted.
Yes, indeed.
If anybody who served in the British Army of the Rhine for 15 years, 20 years, around that sort of mid-70s onwards, very familiar sight.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Very effective too, it must be said, and is often forgotten, I think. During the first Gulf War in 1991, the Army and the Navy used the Lynx to significant effect. On one day in February 1991, an Army Lynx destroyed 2 Iraqi armoured personnel carriers and 4 T-55 tanks, and that was the first ever operational employment of the TOW missile.
And what a great job Project Lynx have done here in making this aircraft airworthy again. We say it's a historic aircraft. It was in service less than 10 years ago, the Lynx. It's a modern historic.
Yes, it was. In fact, this very one was in service just 10 years ago. It dates from 1978. It was built as a Mark 1. Westland, the manufacturer, kept it as a test and demonstration aeroplane, delivered it to the Army Air Corps in March 1983. 10 years after that came the upgrade to Mark 7 standard, as we see here, with new electronics, more powerful engines, being the Rolls-Royce GEM turboshaft, a revised tail rotor, and infrared shrouds on the engine exhaust. And it had notched up 6,500 flying hours, this airframe, in service with the Army Air Corps by the time it was retired in 2013. It was then used as a donor airframe for the Wildcat program that Andy just mentioned. The airframe was stripped and disposed of by the Ministry of Defence. Graham Hinckley, who's owned many historic helicopter types, then bought it. He intended it to be literally a garden ornament, a static showpiece in his garden at home. But he then decided on a return to flight project. Wheeled Aviation at North Weald performed it. It took to the air in a hover for the first time in December 2021, and its first proper full flight was on the 14th of February last year, and it's embarked on its display career only this season.
A large number of these manoeuvres being flown at very high altitude for a Lynx. When we talk about its operational role, it very much was nap of the earth, between trees, not over them. The only way to survive on a battlefield was very low, out of sight, keep low, get targeted information from the Gazelle, largely in this case, and engage.
It was, of course, the then Augusta Westland built Apache that took over from the Lynx as the Army Air Corps' prime anti-tank helicopter asset. Worth mentioning also, Andy, that 3 Commander Brigade Air Squadron, the Royal Marines flying unit, also used Army Lynx, as it were, such as this. Later 847 Squadron of the Royal Navy, but it continued that Royal Marines battlefield support role.
Earlier that the Lynx holds the absolute world speed record for a helicopter. There's a lovely story about when that actually took place. Obviously the Lynx was quite heavily modified for that to happen, and the route flown was over Somerset. Where else? Westlands, obviously, and members of the workforce were positioned as mile markers holding flares, and Trevor Eggington said how wonderful that was, flying this amazing machine built by amazing people to break a world record. And as he broke the record, he could just pass from flare to flare with people waving to him on the ground. I think that's a lovely story.
And in fact, that very airframe survives and can be seen on display at the Helicopter Museum in Westland-super-Mare. It was just over 400 kilometres an hour the Lynx achieved, G-Lynx being the registration of that helicopter. It had new rotor blades, it had upgraded GEM engines. As I say, it still holds those records. It had always been apparent that this was a brilliant performer because development links broke helicopter world speed records as far back as 1972 as well. From 2006 they were active in Afghanistan, and for a very long time they were stalwarts of British operations in Northern Ireland, of course, alongside other Army Air Corps assets such as the de Havilland Beaver. Pass, I think, here, and probably landing on the far side of the airfield to go and refuel over there. Two former Army Lynx pilots at the controls for this display, Clive Clark and Rich Misselbrook.
And again, that camouflage. Absolutely wonderful. The aircraft completely disappearing. Variety here at Cosford. This is Galley in the glider.
So there you can see the Scheibe Turbo Falca target.
Well flying, and we've got lots more to come this afternoon. If you are here with young children, it is worth just having a quick chat with them in case they do get parted from you. It's so easy to get split up in these large crowds. So just an idea to have a quick chat and say, look, this is where you should go, or this is what you should do. Yourselves with the yellow and white public information marquee, which is right in front of the control tower, nice and easy to find, brightly coloured. You can find out all you need to know about the air show, but more importantly, it is the Lost Children Centre, so that is where you should head if you get a special deal today. And there's a wide range of aviation books, special magazines, and some other great products there as well. And as I say, a chance to meet some of the team that put together
the famous Flypast magazine. A quick reminder again, we don't want anything to interfere with the flight this afternoon. A reminder that if you do have a drone, please do not use it. It's illegal to use it on an airfield, near or on an airfield. But we do have specialist equipment here at RAF Cosford.
Not to see that representative of the early post-war Royal Air Force, and indeed in this case the early post-war Italian Air Force, because it's the most stalwart supporters representing the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and a team that we've not seen in this particular type of Extra 300 because they upgraded in 2017 to this 330 LX model. Getting airborne now, the Royal Jordanian Falcons, and they'll be getting into formation, ready to run in and start their display shortly.
Beautiful formation takeoff.
So we mentioned we'll hopefully soon see a pit special. The Royal Jordanian Falcons originally equipped with the pit special before moving on to the extra, and I believe this is probably the third mark of extra they've flown.
Yes, the team started life in 1977 at the behest of His Majesty King Hussein himself, a pilot of great renown. They started out with their first British display in 1979 and were then regulars with the pits on the European and Middle Eastern display circuits, plus occasional visits to North America indeed, until 1992 when they converted to the extra EA 300. Initially at that time the mid-wing model, they then later switched to the low-wing 300L. Now, and really new dimension has been added to their sequence in the past 6 or so seasons with this 330 LX model, one of the most recent developments in the line of high-performance, unlimited competition and display aerobatic aircraft designed by the German aerobatic pilot and engineer Walter Extra. And this team, one of its greatest exponents. You can see they've started off in box formation, the smoke goes on, and we present to you the 2023 Royal Jordanian Falcons. So they start off in box formation for an initial quarter cloverleaf manoeuvre, drawing in the sky the outline of a quarter of a cloverleaf. And we'll soon see the first of the formation changes, as from box they go into T for Tango formation for the line abreast loop. And out of that, the team will be transitioning into a left-hand barrel roll. Once again, as if tracing the outline of the inside of an imaginary barrel in the sky. And as they head towards the right-hand end of the display line and roll out, they'll be using a wing over to bring themselves back onto the display line for a cloverleaf once again, but this time to the left. Leading the team for 2023 is Captain Jamil Zayad, who joined the team back in 2002 as a display pilot. He first became leader in 2005, and he's also the director of operations, as well as leading the team through its display. He joined the Royal Jordanian Air Force in 1992 and graduated from the King Hussein Air College 3 years later. He's got in excess of 3,400 hours in his logbooks, flying the F5 and the Mirage F1 in the Royal Jordanian Air Force on the front line. So there is that cloverleaf. And as they head away from us, they're doing so on what we refer to as the B axis. The A axis is the one parallel to the main runway. The B axis is at right angles to that. They head away from us and pull up, but now separating and putting the spoke on for the Falcon's heart. Very nicely executed. Air College, flying the F5 in the fighter role, and then the Airbus C295 twin turboprop transport. Runs in line astern for the trail loop. A very, very tight three-ship Vic formation. The right-hand end of the display line before fanning out. Three aeroplanes now going into line abreast, and we'll see them pull up in unison. The speed gradually bleeding off for synchronized stall turns. Up and up and up they go. And then each applying rudder. Beautiful synchronization. See now the lead and the left wingman going into mirror formation with the right wingman barrel rolling around the smoke as they execute a turn to the right. Flying in mirror to the leader is the left wingman in the 2023 formation. Than the last time, and once again the solo coming in. Another couple of minutes of freestyle solo work. The amount of so many different famous display teams. We particularly think of the Blades team from 2XL Aviation, now disbanded of course, though 2XL still active in so many other areas. You might have seen in the static display, we had them at Cosford many times. Also the Extra 300, the mount of the Chilean Air Force aerobatic team, the FALCONS, and the 330 model equips the French national competition aerobatic team, the Équipe de Voltige. Now look out in front of you. You can see the soloist heading away, you can see the three-ship heading in, inverted with smoke on. And this is time for one of the signature manoeuvres of the Royal Jordanian Falcons, as they now roll the right way up and head in towards the display datum for the Hashemite break. At King Hussein International Airport in the beautiful city of Aqaba. Every season for many a year, with only a few breaks, one of them having been due to the pandemic of course, the team has its aircraft transported over in C-130 Hercules transports of the Royal Jordanian Air Force for a wide-ranging European tour, of which this, as I said, is the first stop for 2023. A wide array of appearances at some of the European continent's main air shows scheduled between now and late September. Always these slots by the solo pilot used to fill the gaps between the main formation heading away and returning. And here a demonstration of a gyroscopic upward tumble as the solo heads away to the right. If you look out to the left, there's the three-ship towards the main display line. in opposition to them. The three aircraft crossing there with the solo going onto the knife edge, and up goes the three ship in line abreast formation for a loop. The one pilot I haven't spoken about yet is the right wingman. That's Major Ahmad Al-Rababa, who joined the Royal Jordanian Falcons in 2019. Like all his colleagues, a graduate of the King Hussein Air College, doing so in 2009 as a fighter pilot. He flew the F-16 for 8 years, including a stint as an instructor pilot. And now the main formation getting back together with the solo and slot man, Captain Sharif Hatouk, tucking in at the back of the formation for the final set of four-ship manoeuvres, beginning with one that's absolutely beautifully executed by the team every time we see it, a slow roll in box formation. Now, an accurate slow roll is difficult enough to fly if you're on your own. Imagine then the added challenge of doing so in close formation with three other aircraft. Amount of coordination and concentration on the part of all four pilots. And out of that, against this steadily darkening sky, the team heads up and in a right-hand turn to bring themselves back in straight towards us on that B-axis at right angles to the runway. And as they do so, they'll be changing into Concorde formation. It's worth recalling that it's so appropriate to see the Royal Jordanian Falcons flying at an active Royal Air Force station, because military cooperation between the UK and Jordan goes back many years. For so long, of course, it was greatly encouraged and furthered by King Hussein himself, who was very heavily involved with number 6 Squadron, Royal Air Force. Spent a good deal of time stationed out in the Middle East. And so the team are honoured guests whenever they fly at an RAF base, but here they are coming in now Concorde formation for the final manoeuvre of their display, the Concorde break. That was the 2023 Royal Jordanian Falcons.
That this aircraft came to the attention of the world through amazing pilots winning all sorts of awards. Still formidable display aircraft, especially in the hands of someone like Rich Goodwin. Everything he does with style. He doesn't do anything straightforward, even that takeoff. Airborne just a few feet into a hard knife edge. He's just going to spend a second or so sorting himself out before he commences his display. This is Rich, of course. There's no such thing. He just goes straight into his display.
Yeah, climbing to his standard display height of some 200 feet and realigning himself on the main A-axis as he comes past us with an initial 3-point roll. And there he goes, pulling up to about 45 degrees with a roll followed by numerous positive G snap rolls, finishing off inverted, and now using the rudder to bring the aircraft round in a 180-degree inverted flat turn. And now what he calls some shoulder rolls as he heads back in towards us. Building up some energy for a big 5/8 loop. with 1.5 slow rolls on the down line.
Difficult to see when there's nothing to compare it with, but this is an incredibly small aircraft, just 20 feet wide, 19 feet long, and I'm just slightly taller than it when it's on the ground. Original Pitts 65 horsepower engine, over 300 in this one.
So some negative G tumbles now at the apex of that half loop, finishing upright this time on the 45-degree downline and heading back down towards the display datum. And Rich will now be pulling up into the vertical. A 4-point vertical roll this time, showing the penetrating performance, climb performance that this aircraft has. Reaching 1,200 feet at the top of this manoeuvre for a double hammerhead stall. Back down to crowd centre, and he'll be pulling vertical yet again. And this time showing more of that incredible vertical performance with a spiral tower. Well, in fact, a few more shoulder rolls to start with. And they're pushing up, Rich experiencing a good deal of very uncomfortable negative G. As I say, this muscle biplane very highly modified indeed. Its power to weight ratio is quite incredible, and there, as he pulls up, he's endeavouring to bring the aircraft pretty much to a stop before it then carries on in forward motion. Apex again, he finishes inverted and returning all the way inverted down the display line. His inverted pass pushing up into 5/8 of an outside loop. Again, this is really, really uncomfortable for Rich. But he brings it all the way round onto the 45-degree downline in the opposite direction. And then as he gets to display datum, there he is putting it onto the knife edge for a knife edge climb. And he performs 2 more snap rolls. The airframe and engine highly modified. It's got a very distinctive wing profile in particular compared with the standard form of Pitts Special. And there, this is one of those moments where Rich very definitely is cooling the engine, particularly necessary in the high temperatures we have today. There he is, resuming things, rolling on his way down with a high-speed dive from the left in towards display center. He'll be pulling vertical, performing an accelerated snap roll to the left, snap rolling to the vertical, and then a torque roll backwards through his own smoke. There's the snap roll. This is what he calls his tower of power. And not quite falling through his own smoke, but there is that torque roll. And another high-speed dive away to the left. And he'll be performing some more climbing snap rolls. And pulling through. Stick, heading vertical once again. 2 negative G snap rolls to the right and a yawing turn to the left. He's about to go vertical yet again. Slow rolling in the climb. And when he's established on the 45-degree downline, he'll be performing some more snap rolls. Has an amazing rate of roll, this aeroplane. And now coming towards the end of this display, and setting up to our left, and there he is on the knife edge. Excellent chance to see the very attractive livery applied to the pits. More snap rolls as he heads away, and a 280 knots for a half loop with 2 snap rolls at the top, topping out at somewhere around 800 to 1,000 feet this time. And now we've seen some helicopters hovering. We'll see an F-35 hovering towards the end of the program, but here is as near as possible to a pit special hovering, put to a very high alpha, high angle of attack. If the wind was a lot stronger, you'd see him achieving something much closer to a hover at that point. But nonetheless, just look at that. The smoke trail giving a really good idea of the angle of attack that the aircraft has established there in relation to the ground. And finally, he can relax. An absolutely fantastic showing by Rich Goodwin with the Muscle biplane. And you're able, as part of the static displays here, Andy, to see Rich's other rather different pits.
We can't wait to see that. So, in fact, there's another historical link here with the idea of having an aircraft with mixed propulsion, having, say, a propeller and something else. And in Rich's case, that's a propeller with 2 little jet engines. Believe it or not, he has a Pitts normal propeller engine on the front, and then 2 small but very powerful jet engines. And believe me, that is something to be seen and something to be heard as well. And we really look forward to welcoming the aircraft in the air here at Cosford sometime soon. But it is located, being a small aircraft, you have to look very hard. Head for the Sea Harrier, I would suggest, and it's very close between the green and grey hangars towards the rear of the showground. You can get up very close and well, just marvel at the engineering, having just marvelled at the pilot. I think it's going to be one very sweaty aerobatic for many reasons. There's many similarities, many differences as well. Quite clearly you can see the roundels on the aircraft in front, very much a RAF aircraft, and certainly a UK design, as opposed to the more grey aircraft behind it, the Bird Dog, very much an aircraft from over the Atlantic. Even though both these aircraft served in very similar roles, which dates all the way back to the first real air power role, back to the days of the trenches in the First World War. What is the enemy doing? If I fire artillery, am I hitting the enemy or not? How can I see? Well, at first they tried balloons. That didn't work because balloons were still over your own lines, and as fixed aircraft developed and the technology gently increased, then spotting became a very important role. And there's many phrases used, but these are basically observation aircraft or spotters. In UK terms, Royal Air Force terms, they were known as air observation post, and they look quite flimsy. They don't particularly look like fighting aircraft, but the job these had was to loiter low and slow over the enemy, directing artillery fire, maybe naval gunfire, maybe calling other aircraft, attack aircraft with bombs and rockets onto a target. So they may look flimsy, they may look light, they may not look menacing, but believe me, a click and a few words down the radio could unleash hell. on an enemy.
This is a really, really nice pairing, because although it's not one of the themes that we're marking at this year's RAF Cosford Air Show, both of these types served during the Korean War. The AUSTER AOP-6s of the RAF were some of the very few RAF aircraft deployed to that theatre. It was mainly the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy that fought in Korea, but apart from some short Sunderlands operating out of Japan, Sunderland flying boats, AUSTERs were heavily engaged in theatre. This was before the Army Air Corps was established as an independent arm, and the first use of the bird dog, the Cessna L-19 as it was known then, was also during the Korean War, it having largely replaced the Piper L4, the military observation variant, or L for liaison variant, of the J3 Cub.
The 1st Royal Air Force Squadron to deploy the AUSTER, number 615 Squadron, a reserve squadron, back in November 1942. And the aircraft, different marks of the aircraft were heavily involved in the rest of the Second World War, through Italy, France, obviously D-Day, and then into Germany as the war in Europe came
kindly on. It was redesignated the O1 in 1962, and most of them were turned over to the US Air Force because the US Army was increasingly becoming a helicopter force. They were then so heavily used in the Vietnam War as forward air controllers, and he said directing air strikes by the likes of F-100 Super Sabres, F-4 Phantoms and so forth. Also as reconnaissance platforms. It came at a price though. 469 bird dogs in all were lost in Vietnam, where they were also flown by the US Marine Corps, by the South Vietnamese, and by various clandestine operators like the CIA's Air America.
We can't overestimate how dangerous this role was. They were literally picking up stones and seeing what's underneath them. Let's fly slowly, see if the enemy starts shooting at us. If they do, we can call fire down on them. No wonder the loss rate was so high. A very, very dangerous role. And I love the naming as well. Bird dog, it's really sort of American for gun dog.
Yes.
In UK. AUSTER, the Roman god of the south wind.
Yes, and it was a name that was applied to aircraft that were of these types here. The AOP-6 is owned by Kevin Hale, who keeps it at a strip near Swindon. This one was flown by the British Army of the Rhine in Germany for many years, as well as back home. The bird dog, which is now joining it back in formation, is an absolutely outstanding restoration. It's one of the oldest bird dogs still around. It dates from 1951. Its Korean War service is not that well known, but it's thought to have been reassigned subsequently to the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, and it remained in Japan through the 1970s. It then spent some time later, around 35 years, towing gliders in Hawaii. Then in 2017, a pair of airline pilots, Shona Bowman and Laurie Gregoire, bought the airframe sight unseen. Laurie performed a 4-year restoration. Some 4,000 working hours were involved in putting it back into pristine condition, aided by Shona.
Yeah, to change formations.
And on the right, next to the leader, Tiger Due, Salim, real name Serim Vetli. He is flying his 4th season with the Patrouilles this year and is also the youngest member of our team. Our mascot, Flatty, is also on board Tiger Due. Flatty is the official co-pilot and member of PSS Tiger Dietchi number 10, and with 1,200 hours has the most flying hours in the red and white F5 Tiger.
Tiger Trev flies on the left side of the leader. At the controls, Major David Pereira, also known as Pepe. Pepe works fully time in the Air Defense Operations Center at the same time.
Pilot on his own in action. Among the Patrouilles team, however, teamwork is the key to success. At speeds of around 540 knots and distances of 3 to 5 meters, everything has to fit perfectly. What counts here? Flying precision and many years of experience. Complete concentration and trust in man and machine. Our pilots are supported by around 15 highly trained and experienced mechanics on the ground.
for the next formation, a few insights into the life of the team. Whoever is on the team here must be anonymously chosen by the entire display team. You cannot apply for it. Being here is a great privilege and at last but not least an honor for every team member, but remains a dream for many.
And dear audience, we'll let you dream and admire for a few minutes today. Enjoy these moments with the ambassadors of the Swiss Air Force, the speed sound of our 6 F5 Supersonics Tiger jets.
Swiss is purely manual work. The leader gives the comrades and allocates the flight path off for the team. In other words, he is responsible for ensuring that all figures and changes in formation take place at the right time and in the right place. Each pilot orients himself according to his wingman and thus keeps his exact position. In addition to the lateral distance, the pilots also fly slightly offset in height. This prevents them from getting into the air vortices of their comrades.
Well, stop. Lightning, go. Now, Achtung, stop.
Of information about our F5 Tiger fighter jets. The two-engine push the pilots in the sky to race of climb of around 170 meters per second. The F5 has been in reliable service with the PATROILLE since 1995. That means almost 30 years now, with a top speed of this fighter jet around 920 knots, so about 1,050 miles per hour. Used mainly in Switzerland as an aggressor for our training. It has been in service in the Swiss Air Force 45 years now. The voice you hear on the radio is live from the cockpit.
Optimized every season and the new formations are added to the program from time to time. Training from the right, the four-sided roll of our soloist JD. Speed around 400 knots.
To the right side.
say now bella ciao to Tiger Sexy, who flies from left to right to say goodbye to you all.
To finish it off, ladies and gentlemen, a surprise, live from the cockpit, a message from our leader.
The Soviet Union, there were various efforts to produce new production Yak-3s to take advantage of the burgeoning export market among Western collectors. For example, the Yakovlev Design Bureau itself built new build Yak-3s. This aircraft was used by Capelle Aviation, who commissioned the new build Yak-3 program I was talking about earlier on for many years, and based in France. It made several...
Come here.
Left to right. Mostly today we've been taking off from right to left. It's all down to the wind direction. We generally in aviation like to do everything into wind if we can. Obviously, if you've got one piece of tarmac, you actually have two runways. You have one in one direction and one in the exact opposite direction. And if you're anywhere near the centre of the airfield, you can see the windsock, which is looking pretty sad at the moment, hanging there very limp.
Yes.
I think at most we've got a couple of knots, almost light and variable wind. So wind not a factor at all for the aircraft taking off and landing, so you can almost use the runway at their own discretion. It's not quite as simple as that, but...
The Yak-3, and we await the arrival of this very impressive 4-turboprop airlifter, the gestation of which began in the early 1980s as an effort to produce a successor not just to the Lockheed Hercules but also the Transall C-160. And it was in 1994 that a full-size mock-up was shown at the Farnborough Air Show. Well, that gestation went on until the first flight of the prototype Airbus A400M on the 11th of December 2009, and it was in 2013 that it came into service with its first operator, France's Armée de l'Air. In then from the right, the Atlas C1. From RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, C-17s and Voyagers forming the rest of the RAF Air Mobility Force at Bryce Norton were also involved, along with many other RAF ground units. The first really large-scale operation for the RAF Atlas fleet was the Afghanistan evacuation in August 2021. 3 Hercules, 4 Atlas, 5 Voyagers and 7 C-17s were involved in that, and they airlifted out more than 15,000 people.
So if you look to your right-hand side, you'll see the aircraft is configured for landing. I'm expecting this to be a low overshoot, so you can see a very tactical approach to the runway here. Hopefully you can see the undercarriage has been lowered, flaps deployed to give the aircraft its best short landing performance, although it won't be landing today, but set up to make that approach. And it will then do missions, austere strip operations, use of night vision goggles, and so forth. It really has brought some new capabilities, or new levels of capability, to the RAF. Back in November 2018, an Atlas set a new record by dropping a 23-ton load by parachute over Salisbury Plain, and that was the heaviest load ever airdropped by any UK military aircraft. And it's interesting to point out that it would take a very small number of aircraft of this sort of type, or say a C-17 or indeed a Hercules, to perform the roles and perform the extent of airlift operations that 70 years ago started in Berlin, using hundreds upon hundreds of C-47s, C-54s, Yorks, Hastings and other types. Berlin engine trailed by the Supermarine Spitfire PR-19 with its Rolls-Royce Griffon. This, the Mark 19. the Spitfire, the basic design of the Spitfire, it was developed into a huge number of marks, right up to 22, 24, and even to some other aircraft such as the Seafang. This aircraft had to rely on speed and altitude to escape the enemy, and they were frequently brought to combat. They were frequently chased because these aircraft were sent out over Europe to photograph targets, both future, current and past. We mentioned any photo reconnaissance aircraft, and eventually it was a RAF squadron leader and photographer called Sidney Cotton who thought we need to do something about this, and he managed to extract 2 Spitfires from the Air Ministry. He deployed his formidable photographic knowledge, producing the first PR version of the Spitfire. He's also largely responsible for this colour, this beautiful blue colour, also pink as well. Being retired, 3 Mark 19s joined up with a single Hurricane, a Biggin Hill, to form the RAF Historic Aircraft Flight, later to be called the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. And this aircraft powered by the Rolls-Royce Griffon engine. Rolls-Royce at the time liked to name their engines after small birds of prey and falcons, etc. This is the Griffon, not the Griffin. 37-litre engine, rated at between 2,200 and 2,800 horsepower. And compare that with the early Merlins in the early marks of Spitfire, they were rated around about 1,000 to 1,100 horsepower. This easily double that. And I'm pleased to say we have 2 other Mark 19s actually on the ground, in the showground today. In Amona and the Ada Dams, after the famous 617 Dam Busters raid. Taking over from the Spitfire, the P-51D Mustang. Here we have one of the applications of the Merlin, but the Merlin only came to be used by the Mustang following the aircraft's initial development with the Allison V1710 engine. May have been an American designed and built aeroplane, but it's one with very significant, indeed crucial, British influence. It wouldn't exist at all were it not for a British Purchasing Commission in New York, which was set up to look into potential aircraft procurements from United States manufacturers as a means of bolstering the UK's own production during the Second World War. That British Purchasing Commission was on the search for more fighters for the Royal Air Force, and while the existing Curtiss airframe
the brainwave, which came about as a result of discussions between the then commanding officer of the Royal Air Force's Air Fighting Development Unit at Duxford, Ian Campbell-Ord, and his friend Ronnie Harker, a test pilot for Rolls-Royce during 1942. It was from that the idea of fitting a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Its performance was a revelation, and so the Mustang was transformed. While the Allison engine Mustangs continued to serve gallantly in such as the tactical reconnaissance role with the Royal Air Force, it was the Merlin engine Mustang, powered by Merlins built by the American automobile manufacturer Packard, making up for the lack of capacity Rolls-Royce itself had while making Merlins for such as Spitfires, Mosquitoes and Lancasters, that came to hold sway in Mustang inventories by the end of World War II. As a long-range escort fighter with the US 8th Army Air Force from bases in East Anglia with auxiliary long-range fuel tanks. Officer of the 4th Fighter Group stationed at Debden in Essex. Air Force Mustang colour schemes that you may have seen in pictures or seen represented at air displays. This one is very simple. It carries no nose art, it carries no mission symbols depicting the number of aerial victories the aircraft scored. It carries solely the regular national markings and the code letters on the fuselage side, WDC. It became known, this aircraft, as Warhorse, though it never actually carried that name. And as part of the Rolls-Royce Heritage Flight, this aeroplane also offers its own salute to the long-running and ongoing association between Rolls-Royce, the engine manufacturer, and today's modern-day United States Air Force.
Universities, colleges and institutions where we promote and inspire the next generation to take up careers in those subjects. And of course the Red Arrows are proud to take the red, white and blue across the UK and the world, showcasing the excellence of the RAF and represent the UK at home. For the 2023 Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, the Red Arrows! Red 1 pulling the team up at 4 to 5G and over 400 miles per hour as they collapse from the wall formation, which is approximately 200 feet from wingtip to wingtip, into 8 arrow formation. Back towards the ground, Red 1 will bring the formation round to the left. Red 1 is squadron leader Tom Bold. Tom is in his 3rd and final year as Red 1. He is a former team member from 2014 through to 17, where he was the synchro leader in 2017. He is a former Typhoon pilot, a former qualified flying instructor on the Hawk T Mark II, And he was also an instructor on the Tucano, where he was the Tucano display pilot in 2000. Keep your cameras trained on the formation for a dynamic shape change as 7 and 8 perform a rollback to change the shape from 8 Arrow into Vixen. As the team come around to the right, you'll see the team formed in a formation known as Short Diamond. Of course, we would normally have 9 aircraft, and you'll have seen earlier this year the video from Officer Commanding RAFAT explaining that we are not a 9 this year down to safety, as we can only train 3 new pilots each year, and the maths just simply didn't work out for this year. However, our aim is to be at our famous trademark Diamond 9 for next year, as Red 1 brings the team around to the right for the Vixen roll. As the team rolls to the left on the right hand side of Red 1 is Red 2, Flight Lieutenant Rich Walker. Rich is in his first year on the team, is a very experienced aviator. He has flown on operations on both the Harrier and the Typhoon. He is the second of our space-themed shapes. Of course, Reds 4 and 5 are now all the way back at the formation, which makes their formation keeping even more difficult, as all the formation references are taken off Red 1, and it's even harder for them being that far back in the formation to see Red 1. As Red 1 brings the formation around the left for the Eagle present. So far we have seen the Apollo space mission formation and now the Eagle landing craft formation. This is in a nod to the importance of space, as the Royal Air Force acknowledges that space plays a vital role in all future military operations, with Space Command formed in 2021 and it reaching its initial operating capability in 2022. Once again, the smoke comes on from Reds 4 and 5. They move up to sit along beside Reds 2 and 3, sat behind Red 6 with Reds 7 and 8 in trail. In May of this year, we celebrated the 80th anniversary of the famous mission to take out the dams in the Ruhr Valley in Germany by that famous 617, the Dam Busters, who obviously fly today in today's Royal Air Force with the ultra-modern 5th generation F-35. This is the Lightning roll. On the far right hand side is Red 4, Flight Lieutenant Ollie Suckling. First year on the team, a former Tornado GR4 pilot and a former Hawk T2 qualified flying instructor. And those familiar to the air show scene will know Ollie in his former role as a flyer with the North Wales based Strike Master pair. And Ollie would like to say hello to his family who are watching today, especially his dad, who's not by eye. That means they're putting the input in based on the commands of Red 1. He needs to make those commands predictable, clear and concise over the radio. It also means that the guys on the outside of the formation who have to move through the bigger piece of sky, the bigger circles, have to put their input in just a little bit early to ensure that the wing of the formation moves as one rather than ripples down the formation that the Red Arrows perform. As Red 1 brings the formation around to the right, get your cameras ready as the Red Arrows ride the storm in Tornado.
Out, rolling, out.
The go call is made from Red 1 and the abort call is made from Red 7 as 7 and 8 roll around the smoke of the rest of the formation. You'll notice that the formation are flying with their air brakes out. That is a small door at the base of the aircraft towards the rear. This means that the throttle is now at a higher setting, it produces a hotter engine gas temperature, and it also disturbs the airflow out the back of the the aircraft. This means that the smoke will burn a lot more brightly and will billow a lot more fuller, which enhances the manoeuvre, such as tornado. Red 7, with Red 7 in trail on Red 6. They roll away from each other, the smoke comes on as they part and perform the crowd favourite, the Synchro Heart. Today's heart is dedicated to Philip Stanton, the father of Adam and Pamela, who recently passed away. And also I'd like to dedicate it to my found family who are here today. Enid sits just behind Red 1 as they perform a series of barrel rolls through the sky, leaving a snake-like smoke trail through the sky in a manoeuvre called the Python. I talked earlier of our blues personnel, over 140 of them, and they wear blue due to the coveralls that they wear. Amongst those blues are 10 individuals who are specially selected to fly in the aircraft in between displays when we cannot take a full engineering compliment. They are known as Circus. One individual who's with me at every display is Circus 10, Corporal Phil Dye. And he is out in front of the crowd filming the display for debriefing and safety purposes. And it's 800 miles per hour closing speed. They will pass once again within 100 feet of each other. Each aircraft performing an aileron roll. Change their smoke to white before they pull up at 5 to 6G. Reach a height of approximately 2,500 to 3,000 feet, inverted 60 degrees nose down as they complete a manoeuvre called the boomerang. Look to your extreme left. Once again, Red 1 pulling up at 400 miles per hour at 4G. This year, of course, we celebrated the coronation of King Charles III. As Red 1 brings the formation around to the right, get your cameras ready for the Enid coronation vertical break. Red 7 and 8, the red and blue go on as they roll around the smoke of Red 6. Smoking blue is Red 7, Flight Lieutenant Stu Roberts. Second year of the team, he was Red 2 last year, and he has flown the Typhoon on operations with 11 and 12 Squadron at Royal Air Force Coningsby. Squadron in a better place than when we joined. Looking to your right hand side, you have Enid running back in, smoking white. As this red smoke comes on and Reds 2 and 3 roll around the rest of the formation. Clear and go is the call as Reds 4 and 5 roll around as Enid perform the rollbacks, which is one of the hardest manoeuvres for our new pilots each year to master. Seven and 8 smoke blue as they roll around the red smoke of Red 6 in Vortex. Get your cameras ready for Hannah's last break of the show, the Hannah break. Once again, Red 6 are Tom, the crossbow. Leaving the infinity symbol in the sky for the infinity break. Royal Air Force Cosford, it's been an absolute pleasure. Please put your hands together for the 2023 Royal Air Force Aerobatics team, the Red Arrows! Take them back to land at Royal Air Force Shorebreeze, just up the road, which is where we are operating from.
The afternoon will pan out. I do feel like I've been the bearer of bad news throughout the day, but fingers crossed that we can get everything that we have planned for you for the rest of the afternoon actually in. So next display item is due to be the WASP in a few minutes time. Then that will be followed by the Cap-10, which is in fact the aircraft you can see getting airborne in front of you now. I think that aircraft is going off to the hold for a while before coming back to display for us. Worked out, we will have the F-35 at 5 o'clock, followed by the Lancaster to close the show. So that's what we're looking at the moment. I said, subject to all the usual caveats, I'm afraid.
Well, it's been a day of changes and caveats, as Andy said, and just to repeat something I mentioned earlier, the next item is in fact a replacement, a late replacement for one of the current military teams that we were to have seen, the Royal Navy Black Cats with their Wildcat helicopters, unfortunately not able, I believe for some operational reasons, to join us today. So Navy Wings have stepped in. This is the name of the charitable organisation which has really taken over from the old Royal Navy Historic Flight, which has now been disbanded, in displaying Britain's naval aviation heritage. It's still based at RNAS Yeovilton in Somerset, so long the spiritual home of naval flight. The Saunders Roe Company. Now, we have an incredibly rare Saunders Roe aeroplane in the shape of the mixed power jet and rocket SR-53 development aircraft, which is among the RAF Museum exhibits, positioned just to the left of the control tower. Well, the design of the Sea Scout, but here it is in production form, running in to start its display from the Navy Wings heritage flight, the Westland WASP HAS-1. What's rather interesting about this helicopter, for one thing, is its concept of operations, because it was largely seen just as being a platform for carrying weapons. It would be sent and directed by its parent small ship, by other vessels, or by a Westland Wessex HAS-3 helicopter to attack an enemy submarine. It was able to operate up to 100 miles from its mother ship. They were able to carry a variety of weapons, torpedoes, depth charges, a nuclear depth bomb. Later they were adapted to carry wire-guided missiles for attacks on surface targets as opposed to submarines. Now, absolutely crucial is the undercarriage, this four-wheel castering arrangement, which was intended to allow the WASP to manoeuvre even on a heavily pitching deck of a small ship. Now, those wheels of the naval Westland LYNX had already started when the Falklands conflict broke out in 1982. Nonetheless, 11 WASPs served there, and they did so gallantly. They flew from 8 different ships, frigates, the ice patrol ship HMS Endurance, a container ship, and from survey ships. And it was on the 25th of April 1982 that 3 WASPs, flying from HMS Endurance and the Type 12 frigate, HMS Plymouth, along with a Wessex and 2 LYNX, attacked the Argentinian submarine Santa Fe, which had been resupplying Argentinian positions on the island of South Georgia with troops and equipment. The WASPs used their wire-guided AS-12 missiles, and the submarine was abandoned. It was the first naval casualty of the conflict in the South Atlantic 31 or 41, I should say, my apologies, years ago. It was bought, the WASP, by a few overseas customers: Brazil, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Netherlands, New Zealand and South Africa. Relatively small production run, 133 in all, 96 of them in total served with the Royal Navy, which retired the type in 1988 when the last of the Navy's Type 12 frigates was decommissioned. Indonesia and New Zealand kept flying them until 1998. Malaysia, well, its WASP soldiered on into the first year of the 21st century. This one dates from 1964. It was just the 7th WASP delivered to the Royal Navy. It served in the training role with 706 Squadron. It served with numerous ship's flights with 829 Squadron. And it had several private owners before in 2021 it passed into the hands of Navy wings, and it's in the markings of an 829 Squadron WASP that flew as the ship's flight aircraft on HMS Aurora. There are several WASPs now flying on the UK Civil Register, along with their Army counterpart, the Scout, and they're a really popular private owner helicopter. It's actually quite a good way, one WASP owner was telling me a few months back, of getting into historic helicopters if you're interested in them, because although of course it has certain complexities, it is a type that you can, if you have a helicopter license, quite readily learn to fly, learn the quirks of, and then gain a lot of satisfaction out of owning and flying. So finishing his very spirited sequence, Tim de la Fosse from the Navy Wings Heritage Flight with the Westland WASP HAS-1.
And what a great late addition to the flying programme. I think we've almost got into Jenga replacements on top of replacements on top of replacements.
Very much so.
But it's always a great
sign. Pilots on the circuit, but someone who's worked up a really nice sequence since he first came onto the scene in 2021, courtesy of the magnificent Tiger Club based at Damon's Hall in Essex, an organisation that's furthered the cause of aerobatic display. Cap 10. And it's the first time we've enjoyed his sequence here at an RAF Cosford Air Show, but he's been very lucky to be mentored by some of the leading figures on the British air display circuit over the past couple of seasons. Here he comes, Christophe Simon with the Cap 10. that very distinctive rasp, propeller tips going supersonic at higher power settings, and we'll hear that at several different points of this display. As far as this aircraft's significance in the war years that Andy mentioned was concerned, there was something called the Arnold scheme, named after General Hap Arnold, the commanding general of the 1,800 students entered training at US Army Air Corps facilities under that scheme. Nearly 5,000 of them passed out successfully, so there was quite a high dropout rate among the trainees. And PT-13 and 17 versions, the Air Corps, Army Air Forces versions of this design, carried out the primary training element of the Arnold scheme from 6 bases spread across Alabama, Florida, Georgia and South Carolina. They then moved on to perform basic training on the Vultee BT-13 Valiant. So a bit of height has been gained. Ready to go into a classic flowing display of aerobatics in this aeroplane, which was built as an N2S2 model for the US Navy. It's been owned for some time by Tim Manor, the boss of Kennett Aviation, an ex-US Navy pilot himself flying the Lockheed P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft. And Tim kept it out at Kissimmee in Florida before he moved it to join the rest of his collection in the UK at Old Warden Aerodrome in Bedfordshire. And it made its first flight in the UK at that airfield on the 7th of May 2021. And I think this is only the 3rd display that I know of that it's done at a major air show. It made a couple of appearances at Shuttleworth Collection shows at Old Warden last year. So very nice to see it being flown here at Cosford on its first major away outing. Making the aircraft available at such very short notice for a flight display. Of course, we've had, as we've been recording throughout the day, several more dropouts. We're seeing this due to that flat battery, but thankfully, good work done. And finishing its display, the Boeing STEARMAN N2S Cadet from Kennett Aviation, which was flown by one of the most experienced display pilots on the British circuit, John Beattie. And Jonathan, I gather we can hear a little from John.
John, you're a late addition to the lineup. I think that's the first thing to say.
Well, they told me I'm replacing a C-130, which I think I've just got the one little engine. I feel inadequate, but I'm pleased to be doing.
Training aircraft on the 30
It works quite nicely, bring it down to 120, and it's, you know, feel that you're on the edge when you're upside down. Don't pull too hard or it'll click, you know. So barrel roll the same. Got to get the team in 1982. We didn't have that many shows that year, but it was fun. I enjoyed that. Not too long after that, I joined the Naval Historic Flight as a swordfish pilot. Swordfish, delight for airplane to fly. Absolutely delight. Dead easy. Although don't tell the public that because, you know, looks as though it might be difficult.
Break. We also saw Rich Goodwin leave in understated fashion in his pit special. He's back off to Gloucester. And the LYNX helicopter also departed, heading for North Weald. Right, well, let's catch up then with Red 11, the officer commanding the RAF Red Arrows. I spoke to him shortly after the display.
As far as the Royal Navy's use of this aircraft is concerned, their first operational F-35 squadron is 809 Naval Air Squadron, and that's a number plate that...
Oh, you made it out of the mask? Yeah, I used to do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, our aircraft is now approaching from crowd rear, so I'd like to give you a moment to appreciate the roar of the iconic engines as they make their approach now. What an entrance, and one we hope will stay with you for a long time after this display. Displaying for you is one of only two flying Lancasters in the world, PA-474. Avro land heavy bombers still airworthy out of nearly 7,400 that were built. She is a flying memorial to all those that served in Bomber Command and to those who tragically lost their lives. And this year we've remembered Operation Chastise, known as the Dam Busters Raid, which took place 80 years ago this year. PA-474 was built at the Vickers Armstrong Broughton factory at Wharton in 1945 at the end of the war. She did not see service in any operational theatre. The aircraft joined the BBMF in 1973, marking this. If you'd like to help support us at the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight,
We offer 2 fantastic membership options through our partners, the BBMF official club.